Welcome to Off Panel. Yo everybody, welcome to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and we have a few special episodes coming up to celebrate 25 years of Image Comics. As you may have seen, I wrote a piece for The Ringer on Image's 25th anniversary, and to get the story, I talked with 4 of the 7 founders of Image. So to show my work and highlight the stories behind Image, I'm going to run those stories in full, even if they aren't going to be typical off-panel interviews. And it begins with a guy who got the ball rolling to start with. He was the co-founder of Deadpool and Cable before he became a founder of Image and the creator of Youngblood, Supreme, Prophet, and more. It's Rob Liefeld. Let's dive into it, shall we? So I just want to start with, kind of where you guys were at the very beginning. How would you describe the popularity of the Image founders at the time you were all beginning your plan to leave Marvel?
How would I describe, say it again?
Yeah, how would you describe kind of like your guys' level of popularity? I mean, I know you guys were setting records and everything, but...
Oh, popularity.
Yeah.
Look, I've been revisiting this entire era due to some different deals and contracts that I've had to go through, like literally all summer long, and I found all our old sales figures and all our old vouchers, checks, all my old freelance agreements. And look, when you're holding that stuff in your hands and you just look and you flip through the charts and the statistics, and you just go, man, it's undisputed. Mm-hmm. It's a historical fact how ridiculously, for lack of a better word, it's popular. Yeah, how ridiculously popular we had become. Mm-hmm. And also, if I'm just going to be blunt and honest, it was myself and Todd and Jim Lee who were the front runners of that movement. And I believe our competitiveness just between the three of us was driving the whole machine. Mm-hmm. You had 3 guys who were always trying to one up each other, and I will 100% absolutely point out that they had much better toys than I did to work with. Mm-hmm. And when I charted with X-Force, because trust me, I've been on the convention trail for the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Hardcore. 19 conventions in 2015 alone, and then 2016 I think I did 10 or 11. But and people go, oh, what was your motive for coming up with Cable and Deadpool? And I'm like, to sell comics. Mm-hmm. To move the needle. New Mutants was not a book by any measure that anyone had circled for success, but and the reason I'm taking you down this path is it leads to where the road that I took was because I took a book that was dead,
right,
and jumped it up the charts, and did that with characters of my own creation. Mm-hmm. And early on, some of my peers, of which would be the Image partners, would say, why are you creating all these new characters? Why are you creating all these new characters? Why are you, all the time?
Right.
As if I was, breaking some rules, or truthfully, it was as if I was being foolish. And mm-hmm. I said, well, these look like good deals that Marvel was handing out. And if I do, by chance, create the next Wolverine, I'm in good position here to capitalize on it. And, I guess, so for me, I guess the number was 30. Right. I once I got to 30 characters that I created for Marvel, I figured, well, maybe the next group I should probably own. Mm-hmm. Because and everyone has their trigger moment, but for mine it was before X-Force #1 shipped, and they called and told me that the second line of X-Men toys was going to feature all the, fresh X-Force characters. And I literally was like, what are you talking about? You just launched a line of X-Men characters, and you're jumping 30 years of history, and going right into mine, and they gave me a big speech about how the toy guys at I forget, I think it was Toy Biz was the company. Toy Biz had just thought, my toys and my designs were just so perfect for toys and for exploitation. And I'm 22 years old going, wow, it's exciting. They're going to be plastic and they're going to be 3D and I'll be able to hold them in my hands. But I literally was like, I should, the next group of characters I do, I should control myself. And I'm sure if you've talked to some of my former partners, is Jim Valentino and Eric Larson and I kind of set up an early version of Image when we were talking to Malibu Comics. I believe it was that summer of 90 or 91. And, because Jim came from independence, I came from independence, even if it was briefly, and Eric came from independence. And I think we all long to go back there because, just what that word implies, independent. And so we kind of started forming what I would say the shell of what Image would be in those initial talks with myself and Larson and Valentino and a guy named Dave Olbrich from Malibu. So long story short, look, we were able to generate a tremendous amount of interest transferring our popularity. And the reason I'm studying this analytically and telling you this, I'm trying to break it down to you that I could measure my popularity because I did not take over a book with anything popular about it.
Right.
Hey, Rob, we're going to be canceling the New Mutants. I turned down X Factor because I felt that was too big for my feet. Those shoes were too big. I didn't want to follow Walt Simonson. I didn't want to draw the original X-Men. But the New Mutants was a scrap heap. And when you can suddenly go, hey, we went from 100 to 125,000. We went to 125 to 150. Wait a second, we're doing 300,000. Oh my gosh. And, Bob Harris, who ran the X office, had called to tell me the sales estimates that they had for New Mutants 100. And it was coming out the same month as X-Men 275. And Jim had the sweet triptych pull-out cover that could be a poster, and New Mutants 100 had nothing. It was just a comic. There's no gimmicks. There's nothing. And we went back to press 4 times, and we sold 1 million copies. And that's when I was like, okay, I should probably start thinking about my next move. And again, early talks with some independent publishers, and then the X-Force, launch, and then the toys that followed. That was all a 6-month window. But again, so you go, yeah, maybe I can take some of this with me because I clearly have a following. And, we weren't the first guys in comics to have followings.
Right.
We were just the first guys to push the button, to pull the trigger. I mean, I tell you right now, had John Byrne, Frank Miller, and George Perez in 1983 formed their own company, we'd have a different comic book industry. Everyone would have followed them. I would have bought multiple copies. It would have been the Image comics that we, the same thing that we pulled off, they could have pulled off. So, I mean, it was, when you sit around, you guys, you kind of go, oh, so they were the original Dream Team. And I've talked to people, maybe the original Dream Team was Jack Kirby and John Buscema and Neil Adams, but bottom line, we were the latest Dream Team. And we did something with it.
So based on everything I've heard, people more or less describe you as like the energy behind it. Like you were like the one who kind of
if they told you something else, they're flat out lying. So
yeah, no, everybody is on the same page about that. But you said you started out with you and Eric and Jim because you guys all had a background in independence. Why?
Right.
Why did you need more? Why did you want to bring in more people into the mix when you were trying to make this bold move to create Image?
Okay. It was, here's the deal. Part of why I was the energy, because you got to go, well, why? And I could measure my energy against my partners at the time and the founders, but the thing about the energy, I was fearless about what to do. And the reason for that, and I've been able to look back at those times, and so you had Todd McFarlane that had his daughter, and Jim Lee's wife was expecting. Valentino had a family, and I look back now and I remember, like, would I have been as bold as I was had I had a family? I was single. Comic books and creating comic books was my 100% obsession. To pull off writing, drawing, and inking your own book like New Mutants and X-Force, I had to say goodbye to all my friends. Mm-hmm. I mean, and what I mean by that is, no, I can't go to the movies with you. No, I can't go to dinner with you guys. All my friends who were in college having the time of their lives, I was like, this is my time. This is my time to strike. And so I just was very vocal about what I was going to do. Todd, in contrast, was very measured in playing all of the options. And I would run out of patience going, are you shitting me? Well, we're going to go talk to them and got to them. And he wanted to run this Batman proposal by DC. And of course, then Jim Lee heard about that, and Jim Lee said, well, I'll do a Batman book too. Well, then I'm like, I have no interest in Batman. He's not a character that has ever interested me. But if they're going to DC, I better go to DC too. So I threw my Youngblood cover in and said, okay, I can do a Teen Titans. And so that was an entire delay of about 4 weeks while DC decided whether they wanted us or not. And let's just let's just be honest. Are they the dumbest dumbasses that ever, walked the earth? I mean, they deserve the mockery that we continue to shine on them. They could have stopped their biggest competition. Image Comics would not exist had those dumbasses met our, quite frankly, humble requests. I remember, for me, I don't know what Todd and Jim asked. We were all negotiating on our own. I said, you got to pay me minimum $150,000 an issue for the first 10 comics. And you understand, now, this is a guy who got $1 million for X-Force #1.
Right.
So I'm taking a pay cut. I'm just negotiating minimum guarantees. And, Paul Levitz had a heart attack. And let us know in no uncertain terms that was just not a road they were going to go down. And what he was too busy doing was thinking about what, Jerry Ordway would think, or Dan Jurgens, great guys, but I'm just trying to think of DC mainstays at the time.
Right.
And he was short-sighted, and it cost him. And I'm so glad he was short-sighted, and DC was short-sighted. And once that was done, there was no crying over spilled milk. It's like, great, we can get out of that gear. But I was absolutely derailed because, look, X-Force had to happen because I couldn't be left behind. Todd had Spider-Man. The day Spider-Man #1 came out, the 3 million selling Spider-Man #1, Jim Lee called me around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We would talk often. He opened, hey, Rob, what's going on? Hey, did you hear about Spider-Man? Yeah, I'm next. I was like, what? I'm next. I'm next summer, X-Men #1. And the sickness in my stomach, because I'm like, I can't be left behind.
Right.
And from that moment on, I began my campaign to relaunch New Mutants as X-Force and, stick with the, keep pace with who I thought was my biggest competition. So, like I said, the DC thing was a momentary derailment, but then once it was, guys, I got tired of waiting. So I just said, I'm going to go with Malibu on my own. And I was the, pig on the spigot. They wanted to see how I cooked. Mm-hmm. And I remember the day the sales came in of about initial estimates of 400,000. And then suddenly everybody was on board. And, Todd, who had been saying that he was going to do it, because you got to flip it now. Todd McFarlane goes, if Rob got that, I'll do double.
Right.
And Jim, because again, our competitive, really, we were Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. We were Kobe, LeBron. It was that kind of, I'll score more than you in the next game. And, I'll get the MVP. It was very much a sports style driven competition. And so the numbers on Youngblood got Jim Lee to sit up and come to the table. Mm-hmm. And it got Todd to pull the trigger. But when they say, so when you ask me why did we need more, I'd have gone with just me and Eric and Valentino. Mm-hmm. The DC thing, I am 100% guilty of going, well, I can't let this get away.
Right.
And you also got to understand, I would have done something independent as well. I was going to do my own thing, come what may, and if I had to do it through a filter of also doing DC at the time, that's fine. But the numbers started to pile up. Todd was in heavy recruitment mode, and he is in. I was there. I believe 100% that he is the reason Mark Silvestri joined. He recruited him. I sat one table away and watched him work like a college coach would a top recruit, and he got Mark to commit. And that's when we were in New York for an X-Men retreat. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think that's when Mark was like, yeah, I need a spark. I need to do something. And, I think that at that point, Mark may have been the only other guy to really, commit to. Everybody else was set. Todd had been lurking, and then I'm in. I'm firmly in. Mm-hmm. When I solicited with Image, and like I said, the first sales numbers were coming through, and then Jim does really good math, and he did the math, and it made sense at that point. One of the things Jim told us repeatedly, and it was echoed early by Todd as well, was, well, I got a family to take care of. I got a baby on the way. I got insurance. I got a good deal at Marvel. I remember at one point Todd and I said, almost simultaneously yelling at Jim, mm-hmm. You're going to make millions of dollars. You can buy your own damn insurance. You have no idea how many times, but I got a great insurance package through Marvel.
Right.
That Jim would say. And I'm 22 and it's deaf ears to me because I'm all just complete youthful energy.
Right.
And let's go. And feeling it. Feeling like, we're beasts. Everything we put out is the fans are responding to. And I do believe we had great instincts. Mm-hmm. I would compare us to, Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola, Scorsese in the mid to late 70s, how the studios were completely out of touch with what kind of movies to make, and the auteurs were driving cinema, and everything they did was unpredictable, and yet everything they did worked. So I kind of that was that moment in time for us. But so I remember us barking at Jim, but once Jim was firmly in, and by extension Wills, honestly, they were a team. They did X-Men together, they did everything together. But there were guys who turned us down, like Dale Keown turned us down repeatedly. And then when I was in production on Youngblood #4, because we'd always talk about Dale. I picked up the phone and I said, Dale, I think it was $10,000. I said, I'll give you $10,000 for an 8-page story.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't you use that, bring your character, and test the waters and see if you like it. Now, again, that at that time, that was probably, 2 issues pay for 8 to 10 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Dale responded. So it's kind of like this idea of, hey, come on over and be a part of this movement and experience what we're experiencing. Well, some guys like Dale had to get paid up front. And it worked. Dale came over and the pit happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my recruitment effort, because he wasn't moving based on any other invitations or encouragement. But when we showed him the money, he came. Now you got to understand, the other guys in the business all saw our leaving Marvel as their upgrades.
Right.
So, and you can look and see who benefited from us leaving, and you both the Kubert brothers,
Mm-hmm.
Greg Capullo, Mark Texiera, there were clear beneficiaries. So, which is why I think it was 7 and no more than 7 for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry for the long-winded answer.
No,
I try and
that's
take
great.
you through a number of options, answers, or threads.
It's a complicated story. I mean, it's really great to have all this. But I was curious. It's so you said that Youngblood was solicited before you guys officially left Marvel. Is that the case?
Well, oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I think you can check in the timeline will match up. I mean, I'm probably doing what is it? Maybe X-Force 5 or 6,
Mm-hmm.
and Malibu's running it, and I was alone in the solicitations. All you got to do is, again, this is historical fact, the Malibu Sun, baby,
Mm-hmm.
pick it up. Rob alone, crickets. Issue 2 alone, crickets. Youngblood 3 alone, crickets, and then suddenly I get somebody to join me at the party. I think in the month of June with Todd.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was just like, it's go time. There was a period, Todd really wanted to go and run everything through Dark Horse,
Mm-hmm.
and that would have been a deal breaker for me. And I never didn't like the guys at Dark Horse, and I felt like they would be harder to untangle from than Malibu. Malibu was so in need of us and what we brought to the table that we could call the shots.
Mm-hmm.
Dark Horse was more successful, and I felt like I didn't want a lot of bureaucracy. I wanted to be able to untangle as fast as I possibly could if we needed to cut bait, and that may have slowed down Todd for a while. But like I said, I mean, you understand, I took out a full-page ad in the Comics Buyer's Guide for a book called The Executioners. And those characters would later appear as the Berserkers. But full-page ad in the Comics Buyer's Guide announcing the Executioners. It may or may not have had the Image logo. I'd have to go get the ad. And boy, I got a call at 5:30 in the morning, West Coast, 8:30 New York, and they threatened, Marvel was polite. They were kind. And when I say Marvel, it was Tom DeFalco, and he implied if I went through with this, it would have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And that they felt I was ripping off the X-Men. And, I received the message, and that was better than a legal letter. Tom gave me a polite call, and in doing so, I received the warning and, took heed. And there was never a book that was called The Executioners.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all the proof in the world you need for young Rob Liefeld was looking to break out, and wanted to express myself.
Yeah.
And so that caught attention, and again, the industry suddenly was like, "What's Liefeld doing? What's Liefeld doing? Is Liefeld angering his boss?" And again, like I said, when you're when they finally let me write New Mutants, and I could have the entire vision, and I was no longer receiving plots from Louise, I started. I would do a store appearance every month here in Southern California, and it was okay. There's 150 people at this signing, and then 4 weeks later, in Pomona, there's 400 people in line, and it's rabid. And then New Mutants 100, there's over 600 people, and I'm signing for 6 hours. And you go, there's something happening here. It was palatable. You just had to reach out and physically touch the fans and the crowds. And so we were experiencing it. So again, for me, I'm like, well, I got more in my back pocket than Cable and Deadpool.
Right.
And so that was I keep using the word bold. I choose between bold and reckless.
Right.
And bold is a better word. Although others would have you believe I was reckless. It was just, I had a bold confidence that this was working and this is what we could do. And see, I didn't have to cut my tether to best-selling icons. I mean, I was doing some searching in terms of the sales of the Fantastic Four the other day, and I got charts from 1973, 1976, and 1978. And Spider-Man was number one's top seller for 10 years, from 63 to 70, to 73. And, well, honestly, Spider-Man was their top seller until Star Wars in 1977. And then Star Wars supplanted Spider-Man. And then in 1981, X-Men took over.
Right.
So, and X-Men had a 17-year run at number one. So, for Marvel.
Right.
Being Marvel's number one book. And so you go, Spider-Man or X-Men were always at the top. So I didn't have to cut a tether to some iconic, character that generated sales automatically. I didn't have to say goodbye to Wolverine or Spider-Man. To me, I was like, I got a lot more kids that I can show the world because people like these kids.
Yeah.
And then the arms race, what I call it, of summer of '92. And I was just talking to Kirkman about this the other day. Based on the sales figures of Youngblood number one, you got to remember that summer '92. They announced Marvel and DC both had annual events. One was called New Blood, and the other one was called Bloodlines, running through their annuals, and they all promised new characters. And I think they looked and said, well, you'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to realize that New Mutants was transformed with a whole bunch of new characters. So typical corporate think is, well, I guess people want new.
Right.
But they wrapped them in the word, both events incorporated the word blood. Well, I'm like, oh crap, I got a lot more characters and I got a lot more names. And even my, one of my childhood idols, John Byrne, had said, fairly horrible things that a lesser skinned person would get really upset over. But the bottom line is, in some comment in like the CBG or some interview, he said, you know what? Much as I don't like Rob Liefeld, that guy's got away with names.
Yeah.
He goes, I thought all the good names in comics were taken, and he seems to have tapped into a whole new trove. And I'm like, yeah, look at that. I'm so good, Byrne had to compliment me, and he hates me. Like, but what I'm getting to is, like, I felt like, oh shit, well, I got to get Brigade, I got to get Bloodstrike out there, I got to get all my comics on the, I have to release them. What is been mistaken was that somehow we saw Image as this cash cow, and we're going to, hit the, we were going for the payout. Like, yeah, let's just generate. For me, it was, oh gosh, they're going to take my names. They're going to take my titles. They're now trying to generate, between all these annuals, possibly 45 new characters. And I got to get mine. I can't fit it all in Youngblood, and I have other stories, and I have other names, and I have other characters. And to be honest, I just as I did with, Youngblood, I estimated Youngblood, again, because I had a great dad who came to me and said, son, I'm concerned. You're leaving this really great gig with Marvel. And, I'm not, maybe all the other guys had their dad, kind of sit down with them. And I was prepared. I had my yellow, my yellow pad of paper, my lined paper. And I said, Dad, here's what I'm making at X-Force. On X-Force, but I have to sell like 600,000 copies to generate that income.
Right.
I said, just for comparison, if I sell 100,000 on my own, I get that. I said, Dad, I believe I can sell 100,000. I believe I can sell 100,000. And so it was, I've read other people, they were looking to cash out. No, it's very conservative. For me, it was all about freedom at that point to be able to manage my characters on my own, and if possible, watch them become toys and games. But the bottom line was, make kick-ass comics, because that's what I was good at.
Right.
But now, instead of having, because look, I was suddenly being told options on what Cable's story should be, and I, as a creator, was real. I knew it when I had my eyes on. I mean, I had my glasses on. My eyes were wide open when I signed the deal, knowing that for the percentage that I got to carry for each character, that it was truly owned by Marvel. So there was never a temper tantrum. I just thought I'd have more time to shape it my way.
Right.
And so, again, part of it was I can control my stories and not be told what this character who I had a certain path for is now going to be going down this path. So, the entire desire was to have creative freedom, not to sell all those copies. We ended up doing that by default because our fans, Larry Marder has explained it the best to me. He said, Rob, you're like a balloon that was about to pop. Image Comics, the industry was a balloon, and it was about to pop. The trading cards, the poly bags, the multiple covers, the shiny metal metallic covers. What was that on Cage #1? Acetate. The acetate cover.
Yeah.
It was taking its toll. He goes, and then Image was like the what did he call it? Like not the wart, but he's like, you were like the growth on the balloon, like the unexpected, like there was a little, I think it's perfect. We were the wart that grew on the surface that expanded just a little, but it was all Image Comics. Like nobody had dominion over that except you guys, and nobody could replicate it because nobody could have generated that wart in the first place.
Right.
And he goes, so you added this extra growth that nobody expected, and I would include, we did not expect either. And the end all be all is that when Brigade and Bloodstrike and those other books were put on the schedule, since I wasn't penciling them, I figured, well, these will sell much less.
Right.
And that's when you go, oh no, there's a movement now because those are launching at 1 million copies. And then you go, oh crap, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really did. There was nothing that happened during that period that was predictable.
Right.
And that wasn't tremendously exciting. I just remember every day going, what's going to happen today? Because everything we were doing was generating reactions throughout the industry. I mean, we were a seismic wave of a cultural shift in the comic book industry. I mean, you could feel it, and it was exciting. It was, I have not felt it since then.
Right.
I mean, I would love, I'm always looking for signs that it's going to happen again. And I honestly thought it would have happened a couple times since, but the entire business is a little more conservative than we were. And part of what happened was you did get these 7 guys to commit. And over time I learned all the different discouragements that each guy, was given by the corporate overlords of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And, why are you going with those nut jobs? They're crazy. They're going to drive this off the cliff. So to me, it's great that we hung together and launched. And I mean, I was out to lunch with Robert Kirkman about 6 weeks ago, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't expect you to start crying." I got really welled up with tears. He caught me unexpected, and told me about that his son Nolan is a huge Deadpool fan, and it's just so weird. My son is obsessed with The Walking Dead right now, and his son is obsessed with Deadpool, and he wanted to know more about me and my career, and so Robert told him all this stuff, and he said, "Hey, I just told you." He goes, "Stuff I've been talking to Eric Stephenson about, and I shared it with Nolan, my son, and I want to share it with you." And he goes, "Man, if you didn't do what you did, and you didn't, go out there and get the ball rolling with Image, and if all you guys didn't together launch this incredible company, I would never have made The Walking Dead, and I wouldn't have The Walking Dead on television." And he goes, "I just wanted to say, thank you. Thank you, Rob Liefeld." And I mean, we're having burgers at an outdoor patio.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm like, "Oh man, you're making me cry." And because his sincerity was such, and I've known Robert for 13, 14 years now. He's one of my best friends, but it was a moment that I was super touched. And probably because the way he was communicating it to his son, and I know how extremely, well The Walking Dead, everything has turned out for Robert, and I couldn't be happier for him. And so it was very touching, but it's like we really did buck the predictions. And I heard, when he said that to me, I heard 25 years of the predictions of how we were going to implode and it wasn't going to be there. And, especially those early years where we did take on a lot of, we took on a lot of fire. There were, and obviously not just from external forces, but internal. And it's just great that here it is 25 years later, and Image is the number 3 comic company and kicking so much ass. So I'll take a breath while you ask me something else.
I do want to say I actually talked to Robert, and he said the exact same thing about what he told you at lunch. Yeah, so he said if you guys hadn't done what you did, Walking Dead wouldn't exist, and like that's an incredible thing. I mean, even beyond that, there's I'm doing this podcast next week where I'm going to be doing my top 20 comics, and I think 2/3 of them are Image comics, which is incredible. But
there you go.
I'm curious. One way or another, you were going to do Youngblood. You were going to strike out on your own because you were betting on yourself, and you. I mean, in many ways, that was the amazing thing about what you guys did is you guys were the important factor more than the characters were at that point. Like you guys were the selling points. But do you think that Image would have been as successful if it hadn't been initially all of you guys combining your powers together?
There's no doubt that the numbers is what created the movement I told you about.
Right.
It became who else is joining?
Yeah.
And like I said, it was no. It definitely. It's I may be the one guy on the planet that paid money and liked the recent Magnificent Seven. And you know what? It wasn't called the Magnificent Denzel. It was called the Magnificent. It wasn't the Magnificent Chris Pratt. It was the Magnificent Seven, and we really were. And some guys walked out of that movie and they liked the Vincent D'Onofrio character the best.
Sure.
Some people like Denzel, and some people like Chris Pratt, and so on and so forth, and Ethan Hawke. So no, we were the Justice League, or the Legion of Doom, depending on how you looked at it. But we really, the numbers told the story. It gave it the movement. And yes, Spawn on its own as a Dark Horse comic would have sold 1 million copies. Youngblood in 1992, summer 1992, Youngblood would have sold 1 million copies wherever it landed. Which again, it just goes back to what would have Todd McFarlane Batman and a Rob Liefeld Teen Titans and the Jim Lee, Dark Knight. I mean, again, let's just not let DC off the hook here.
Right.
But the thing is that no, the numbers, the numbers, and again, I think when you got the final rollout, well, okay, Todd and Rob and Jim have been able to do this, yeah, but they were already the top guys. Well, now Shadowhawk's selling 600,000 copies. Savage Dragon selling, 600,000 copies. Mark Silvestri, and I think that's when you guys, when the resistance to our recruiting, and believe you me, I mean, imagine the stories Marvel has of the guys who used us against them in terms of negotiation.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, Image has made me a great offer. But Larry Stroman and that, I don't know, was it One Issue of Tribe? I don't know, but when Dale came over and Larry Stroman, and again, it was Wave 2, and it was who's coming, and I mean, we couldn't shake somebody's hand at a convention or put our arm around a fellow peer without it setting off, I look back now and I see that maybe some of us were played for patsies in regards to they were using us to get a better deal and wanted to be seen going out to dinner with us. But that initial 18-month period, it was suddenly Image, but again, the Shadowhawk Cyberforce sealed it. You've gone through the entire, all the guys have listed their books. All the books are generating heat. All the books are selling. And so I just think that, they absolutely, the second wave of creators lined up, and that just and that continued the heat. I mean, just continued. And you could see we were having fun too. I mean, I'm relaunching a couple different titles. One of them is Blood Wolf, and I was telling Robert, because he has a lot of that original art, and I was telling Robert about how great when I did it. I mean, like Blood Wolf, I think I penciled and inked the whole, I don't know, maybe it was a 10-page story in like 2 days. I just remember I was having such a good time, and if I had taken any more than 2 days on it, it wouldn't have worked. And I know Jim was doing the same thing with Deathblow. Suddenly, you just sit there and you're drawing a page of Youngblood. You're on page Youngblood, page 18. And you go, you know what? I kind of want to do this Blood Wolf parody. I want to, kind of give my answer to Lobo, which has never been anything but obvious, and do this kind of funny story and do make it jokey. And hey, Jim, I saw that drawing you had at the studio, that Deathblow guy. How about you have time? Well, I don't have time to do a full book, but I could do a short story. Oh, hey, didn't Sam Keith want to do something? And suddenly you got Darker Image, and then suddenly Darker Image sells a million copies, and so we were having fun. That story is meant to, like, we had little side projects that became big fun, projects, and I mean it was nothing short of a blast. I just, that entire Image will never, ever, 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 like, my view of Image will always be seen through that 92 to 94 lens. It was where all the excitement was. It was so amazing. So, like I said, it was just, we were given so much freedom, and it seemed like so Jim does his, I do Blood Wolf in a kind of a European style, very little line weights, taking a ride on the Mobius bike, and Jim does his kind of dark noir, Frank Miller, Sin City brushwork. I mean, again, so we were, and if you look at that stuff, it's really great stuff. It stands up and it's fun, and it just shows the mood we were in. We're having a blast. We were having a blast.
So I want to ask about you've talked about Kirkman, and he's a friend of
Yeah.
yours and everything, and he's become a huge success with his work at Image, and he eventually became a partner even.
Yes.
I want to, as somebody who was originally there, who is one of the founders and original
Sure.
partner and everything, what do you think made Robert such a good fit for Image and in that role overall?
I think, well, first of all, Robert had that spirit, that the boldness, that line between bold and reckless that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of, he had great ideas. He had, and he was an amazing production manager. When I picked up Invincible #1, I could not believe I had never heard of Robert Kirkman or Corey Walker. I was like, where did these two fully grown, fully mature artistic voices come from?
Right.
Where have they been hiding? I had never heard of Battle Pope. It was not known to me. And so Invincible was my first encounter, and I could not have been more thrilled. So Robert and I meet in the summer of 2003 when I'm selling Youngblood Bloodsport at convention to convention, because my dream was to sell a comic out of my truck, which I had since I was 16, and I was, living a dream then at 30, 36. And look, first of all, he had the talent.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, he had the drive. That's where his boldness comes from. And thirdly, and most importantly, dude, this guy had his shit together in a way that I have never seen from anyone since. I mean, so we're going, almost 15 years, and Robert Kirkman is disciplined as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I am wildly erratic with my discipline, but when I am disciplined, and when I was disciplined, as I said to that 22, when I got New Mutants, 21, 22, that entire period, just going like, I mean, it's a lonely existence, man. I would get up at 8:30 in the morning. I would go to my studio that I rented at 9 o'clock. My day went till about 1 o'clock for a quick lunch break, and then the teeth of the schedule was from 3 to midnight, inking pages, and then I would go home, crash, hit the bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, and get up the next day and start it again. And I was always looking to catch up, and very rarely getting ahead. But because I inked my own work, and again, there's like Eric Larson did a wonderful thing on Facebook recently about how the relationship between pencils and inkers, especially in the 60s and 70s, was so different than it was now. But when you're inking your own work, that is, you are completing the page. There's no shortcuts. You can't shortcut the communication and hand it off to somebody to finish it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have discipline. And for Robert to have Invincible and Walking Dead come out every month, as he has for all these times, but he was just bold. And Robert, he had a mouth on him too, which I've always admired. Mm-hmm. Robert spoke his mind. And that's the one thing, I think Image Comics was the last group of guys that really spoke off the cuff in a manner that the business, it's not that the business hadn't seen it before, because as I told you, I especially these last several years, I have dove into my childhood and I have just bought Bronze Age comics, rebought my youth, all the collections, because we were in a golden age of collections with hardcovers and Marvel and DC. It's like my entire youth of 1974 to 1985. It's like all in these irresistible formats, and I go back and I dig through my old comics journals and my Amazing Heroes, where I would read John Byrne talk shit about everybody in the business. He'd talk shit about George Perez. He'd talk shit about Frank Miller. He'd talk shit about Jim Shooter. And then George Perez would talk shit about Marvel. And, if you had recently left Marvel, you were always talking shit about Jim Shooter. But, everybody kind of took shots at themselves, other publishers. There's photo evidence in a comics journal of John Byrne mocking how he believed George Perez drew his comics. And he's like, here's a regular person arguing. And then there's another picture. Here's a George Perez argument as depicted by John Byrne depicting, and he's acting it out. So it's a black and white photo of himself, like screaming, like over the top. Robert was one of those guys who, I mean, come on, he made a floating head YouTube that said, you know, hey, why are you doing all these Marvel and DC books when you should be creating your own stuff? And that's what I'm specifically referring to. Yeah. And at that point you go, you are the second coming of Image Comics Magnificent Seven.
Right.
And you know, he's bold, he's talented, he's disciplined, and speaks his mind, and which is refreshing. And look, man, you know, he found his own voice. He doesn't try to be all things to all people either.
Right.
You know, I knew the last thing that Rob Liefeld should draw. There was entire categories that I was like, that would not play to my strengths. That would not play to my strengths. Robert knows how to play to his strengths. The Image guys knew how to play to their strengths. You know, gear and weaponry and armored warriors were my thing. And I carry that. Some people call it a trope. Fair enough. I carry that with me. Robert knows what his thing is. And, you know, I cannot, he is such, and when you talk to him and how he bought our books and how he had his mom drive him to conventions and comic stores and even the convention where he thought we were appearing because it was false advertising and we weren't really there. And it was only like the guys from Boof and the Bruise crew. And he didn't want to reveal to his mom that she drove 3 hours for nothing. So his heart was broken, but he acted like he had the best time in it. And when you hear this guy tell these stories, they are, I mean, Robert is a true child of Image Comics. And here, so look, I'm doing this project, you know, one of many projects I'm doing right now. I'm working with Chad Bowers, and we had a call for Youngblood the other night, and we went on for quite a bit, and then he just stopped me. And he said, Rob, I got to tell you how much I love Die Hard. I got to tell you how much I love Youngblood and what a dream come true this is for me. And I was 10 years old when my mom drove me to my first Heroes Comic Con, and I was able to catch up and get the issues of Youngblood that I wasn't able to get. And I bought Savage Dragon, and I bought Wildcats, and Rob, I bought 6 Die Hard action figures when Todd put them out, and I broke them all because I loved having an army of Die Hards. And let me tell you, they went at it, and he goes, you don't mind me telling you this? I go, are you serious? Am I not lapping all of this up? And Jeff Johns has a binder that he showed me with a full array of witnesses, Robert Kirkman, Sterling Gates, Jeff Loeb, of all his Youngblood characters that he drew, and the Youngblood fan fiction that he and I have a 10-page story that Jeff wrote of Youngblood that I have never acted on, that eventually I will act on. But I think it would get him in trouble. He gave it to me, but now being that he's such a muckety-muck, I'm sure there'd be a problem. But I mean, so and Jeff Johns told me what a huge Youngblood fan he is. And both him and Robert, and I see in their eyes the same love and adoration that I have for John Byrne and Neil Adams and George Perez. And it's this bond we share, which is ultimately a love of comic books. But what Kirkman is one of those child of images that are popping up, and they're getting bolder in their voice. But he just was young, ambitious as hell. You got to be ambitious. You know, Image Comics is not for the not ambitious. You have to ruthlessly want to determine your destiny, and you got to have a plan. And the people who don't have a plan, you know, part of the plan is you got to stick to the plan.
Right. When
the plan doesn't work. But you know, and Robert can tell you there were some low days on that Walking Dead sales chart as he, you know, would you know, have to make hard decisions. Am I going to continue? Am I going to cut it? That's what I'm talking about. You know, you got to stick with it. You know, last year I published a biblical thriller action comic called The Covenant. It was never, you know, I joked, I said, oh, you know why I'm doing this? I'm doing this to capitalize on the huge biblical comic book action marketplace. I mean, what are you talking about? You know, well, I'm going to get some of that money. Obviously, if you carry this, we need to communicate that market doesn't exist. That's a joke.
Yeah, of course.
I just said, I want to do this. I want to do this with my buddy Matt Horak. I'm willing to take the long ball on this and get it into a trade, and it'll, you know, I won't say which collection, but there was one of the books that launched in 2011 as part of the revamp of Extreme with Brandon Graham on Profit and all the other books. One of those books yielded their first significant, the first royalty ever, but it was significant. And you go, wow, 4 years in, this collection's hit pay dirt. It's the costs are taken care of, and now it's generating. Some of the other guys who are already, what I would say, heavily branded, like I can only imagine Rick Remender and Matt Fraction's collections yield huge numbers out of the gate.
Yeah.
But even when you, but I'm not sure that they have a covenant that they go, I'm just publishing this because I want it in print. And I believe that this will be viable 20 years from now. You got to have a plan. And my plan was, I'm going to lose money on this because it's not Armored Warriors. You know, it's an untold tale of the Bible. And, you know, but you do it because you go, I've already planned this out, and I know that eventually this will pay off for me. And, you know, it's kind of the same problem we had with the studio system in the early Image days, that the younger guys, Jim Lee and I used to talk about it. I won't name his guy that he named, and I won't name my guy that I named, but we had two guys who were desperate to get the Wizard to love them. And we were like, wait, okay, we got into comics to draw comics and to be exciting and just enjoy that you're in comics at such a young age. We would tell these guys, and he's like, oh my gosh, this guy, he doesn't understand why Wizard hasn't anointed him yet. And, you know, we can have a whole separate, you know, interview on the poisoning of the Wizard on the comics industry. But I mean, it was, you know, stuff like you go, whoa, no. You can't be focused on whether you're going to be hot.
Right.
Do your job. Be happy that you've got a job to do. You're broken in. You're associated with Image Comics. Your book is being seen by a lot of people, which opens up other doors for you. And you've got to look, you know, what I'm addressing is these short-term thinkers are difficult to manage on any level.
Right.
And, you know, Todd's motto was always, if Image Comics sales, we'll all have work at DC.
Right.
And that was funny. It was said funny. It was received funny, but it was 100% true. You know,
yeah.
Like there was somebody, if Image wiped out, we would be fine.
Right.
I did not get into comics to be rich. I got into comics to tell comic book stories. And so Image was just another extension of that, and the ownership that it involved literally gives us so many options. But it was always about the comic books. And, you know, so again, Robert, just finalizing on him, I mean, I just cannot, the guy he's the whole package. Again, if going back to sports, you'd be like, he's got a great vertical. He can shoot the 3-ball. He's not scared to take it inside. He's got great court vision. I mean, he was the perfect Image guy. And then he turns out to be like, he loves Image's legacy, loves, you know, the founders, the partners. Look, and also, let me just cut to the shit, because I told him, you know, there's a segment of a TV show that he's doing that focuses all on Image. And at the end of the day, I tell Robert, because let's just cut to the chase. Image Comics exists in the form it does today because of Robert Kirkman and everything he's done. You cannot have a discussion about Image Comics that does not, from about 2008 to present. So I mean, we're talking 9 years. That does not involve his success carrying the company and giving its having a new foundation to build on that allows Eric Stephenson to make all the moves he makes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hasten to say it for the brushback, but Robert Kirkman, if he didn't save Image Comics, he elevated Image Comics to where it is now. Because, man, those early 2000s were some dark days.
Yeah.
You know, I would look through the catalog and I'm like, there's all these, they look like semi-pornographic comics.
Yeah.
And it's just tits and ass. And, you know, how is this different than anything else? And, you know, with Eric being elevated in the last several years, maybe a decade. Yeah,
2008.
And, yeah, so, you know, and he recruited me in 2007. He said, Rob, everybody wants you to come back, have Youngblood. I've got guys who want to do Youngblood. And I was like, is this real? But that was all. I think Eric was getting ready. I think it was 2007. Yeah, because that's when we announced it. And Robert, I mean, again, Robert's like, Rob, you know, I've been working some stuff behind the scenes, and it's safe for you to join the club.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'd like. And I was like, oh man, that'd be great. But that aside, just from a business standpoint, you know, Walking Dead is to Image what Batman is to DC, and what, you know, the Avengers is to Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
It is the bedrock of the last 10 years marketing, you know, publishing plan. So he's a titan. I mean,
right.
and I can separate and talk about him outside of him as my friend. I could not be prouder of what an accomplished guy he is. And I look at dinner with non-comic book friends and family last night. I said Robert Kirkman is the most successful guy in the comics industry. Period. End of discussion. Mm. There is no argument. You can argue who number 2 is, but number 1 is not up for debate. And you know, he really has made shrewd moves. And again, it reflects on what we were able to do 25 years ago, but he has so many more options because of the advancement in technology and media. But again, he hasn't slipped up. You know, you go, I mean, The Walking Dead is, when you look at Star Wars, you go, everybody passed on Star Wars. And Robert knows, I called Walking Dead Star Wars a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what do you mean by that? And I gave him his long explanation. And now he goes, no, I remember. You told me Walking Dead's my Star Wars. And I said, but I, you know, you got everybody who passed on Star Wars, and Fox was the little studio that gave George his chance. And then you had everybody in Hollywood passed on adapting the Lord of the Rings books. Mm-hmm. And only New Line would give them a chance. And you sit there, and in both those deals are all sorts of loopholes that made the people who took the chance on them, gave new life to the Tolkien estate, gave new life to George Lucas. And with Robert, his shrewd business moves, I mean, he's got so much going on for him in regards to The Walking Dead. And I have a son who has known Robert his entire life, but did not revere him until he binge watched The Walking Dead on television, mm-hmm. and is now part of The Walking Dead, you know, converted, mm-hmm. and is, I mean, everything. And I go, Robert made that, and he made that through Image Comics and his management of his publishing through Image Comics. I mean, I've had discussions, Robert, why don't you spin it off? Why don't you spin it off? It'd be so easy. And again, that's one of his shrewd moves. Nope, not spinning it off. Mm-hmm. The only place you get Walking Dead is this comic. You know, the only way you get a Walking Dead comic is from me and this comic. And whether it's his management of his trades, his hardcovers, like I said, dude, I can blow him all day long because I believe it. It's easy, and you see it. And I do believe that when Invincible and Walking Dead launched, Image was wobbly. Mm-hmm. And, you know, with Robert finding his success and the creation of Skybound, you go, man, I mean, he is the, you know, I don't want to say the savior, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to not say the guy, you know, at the very most defines what Image, he defines all of Image's appeal in the 21st century, period. I mean, that's as easy as I can make it. So.
Yeah. Well, I just have a couple more questions, and one I wanted to ask was in regards to one of the other most important players of the modern era, Eric Stephenson, and he. I mean, I didn't realize until I started researching for this that he came up in Extreme Studios. What?
Of course.
How important to the growth of Image do you feel he's been since he took over as publisher?
So Robert is the right hand, Eric is the left hand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they work together, and anyone who doesn't understand that doesn't have their eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
Eric is a great. In Hollywood, they say a great producer is defined by his taste. His taste in material, his taste in actors, directors. Eric Stephenson has great taste. He's a tastemaker. Mm-hmm. And his tastes line up with Robert, and occasionally they don't. And Robert has faith enough that Eric's tastes stand on their own. Eric does have great taste. Eric was really the guy managing the Alan Moore account for me at Extreme. Mm-hmm. We had, look, in all honesty, and to record it as historically as possible, Alan called us soliciting work because for whatever ridiculous reason, he had fallen out of favor and perhaps mismanaged his own career. And he called us looking for work in the 90s, and that's how he got with Todd on Velocitor, what's it called? Violator.
Yeah.
And then we gave him the follow-up with Violator Bad Rock. Yes, kids, Alan Moore wrote a Violator versus Bad Rock comic. Mm-hmm. Well, following that, Alan had done some poking around and saw what Extreme had, and that's when he said, hey, I could write these books for you. I could do a Supreme, I could do a Youngblood, and all I had to do was say yes and agree to the payments, and then Eric was the one that invested the time on the phone with Alan for 3.5 years. And I've talked to Alan, and he's more long-winded and much more obtuse than I am. Mm-hmm. And Eric spoke his language, and they got on like a house on fire. And, Eric has great taste. Eric is also shrewd and sees the long ball, doesn't get baited by other publishing tactics, and not afraid to make a controversial call every once in a while. Mm-hmm. Sticks to his guns. I mean, again, they're it's like Kirkman supplies the fuel, and they're both flying the jet. Is how I look at it. Yeah. And I'm not meaning to disrespect my former partners and my fellow founders, but I'm pretty sure they're not as engaged in the day-to-day. Operations of Image. They're off running the Mark Silvestri career and the Todd McFarlane career, mm-hmm. and the Eric Larson career, and so Eric is running the Image Comics vision, and I think he's he and Robert are very close, but again, Robert is not running Image Comics. Robert is running Skybound, but I do believe that they have a great relationship. And I do believe Robert Kirkman, he's not running Image, but he's invested in Images. And because he's told me, he's had talks with me about Image's legacy, mm-hmm. and how invested he is in it. And it's like, as a partner now, he wants to ensure that it is a bright future. And that Image, again, what we're going to also find when we talk to Eric and Robert is how ridiculously ambitious they are, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Again, it's just fantastic. So everybody in Image, should really appreciate what Eric brings to the table. Like I said, I could just end it with the thing I said about taste. I've given you some great examples, but he's a good businessman. He's shrewd, but at the end of the day, he knows what books best reflect what he's trying to accomplish, and at any given time. And he's open to new things. A lot of publishers, they just stick to the one thing they believe. Eric has, I've seen him change his taste and fluctuate, and for the benefit of the company.
Yeah,
so it's great. It's great. And I couldn't be prouder. Eric, I had so much fun with him at Extreme, and he was, such a, a joy to. He was one of the reasons it was so fun to come in all the time, because he was engaged. He was, comics were everything to him.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys who are just doing it on autopilot, and there's guys who are fully engaged. And Eric is fully engaged, so that's the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, Eric is definitely not an autopilot type of guy.
Nope.
So the last question I have for you is, I think the amazing thing is like, when you guys started in 1992, you guys, from everyone I've talked to, you guys always intended to offer the creator-owned deal to other people, and you wanted to bring in other people.
Yes.
But, it seems like Image has fulfilled all the promise it had when you and the rest of the founders first launched it. Do you feel that it has done so in the same way as you expected it to back then, or has its development surprised you in any ways over its 25 years?
No, I'll tell you, in 1995, 96, and frictions were high with all of us, but I said, I think we should have a junior partner system and run Image like a law firm and really incentivize some other guys to invest heavily in Image. Mm-hmm. And I cannot tell you how the brushback I got from that was pretty severe. Like, how stupid was I? And I was like, I just don't see this continuing as just us. And I'm bringing that up because, adding Kirkman. So it's funny to me now, it's exactly on course as it should be. It hasn't betrayed anybody. It really is. You got to bring your best. And you gotta, look, at some point everybody has to catch lightning in a bottle. We did. And it's hard to replicate, but it's sometimes you can bring your best, but I'm referring more to you gotta have a plan B and C and so but I felt the future was incorporating a greater amount of partnerships. And I think that they have done, look, I'm not obviously invested in Image beyond I run my books through them, and it's a part of my legacy. And I will always root for them and cheer for them. And, I designed that damn logo on a napkin. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not about to ever throw stones at it. So I can imagine Image continuing to expand from where they are now, and increase. Look, I know they don't want to stop until they're at the top, and there's no reason for them to settle for less. And they have all the tools, and again, like you said, the tools at their disposal are the same tools that we, established way back in 1992. Mm-hmm. So the thing about Image, though, like I said, you got to come ready to, do the work, put in the time, and the number one reason that I was invested in what I did back then was to build a library. Mm-hmm. Now, and I gotta say this because this is, it's I think about it every day. I talk to myself about it, and while Robert is the greatest success of Image Comics perhaps ever, the heart and soul of Image Comics and the greatest embodiment of what we did is Eric Larson. Mm-hmm. And I cannot tell you if there is someone I am envious of, and going back to discipline and dedication, because often you yearn for what you don't have. And Eric Larson is Savage Dragon is a spectacular comic book saga, and he authored every single issue and continues to author every single issue if there's anybody that took the ball and ran with it. And I have his compilations, the black and white phone books, I've got his trades, I've got the singles. I've seen how he develops his stories, his characters, his style. Mm-hmm. And I really believe, like, when you think about like who really embodied what Image was intended to do, and it's Eric Larson.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could not be more. He's the most prolific of all of us, and again, you cannot diminish that he writes and draws the book. I know others would say, "Oh, but I've been publishing for this." No, that's not the same. I can publish 500 copies of Youngblood, but I didn't draw all of them.
Yeah.
And write and draw. I mean, Eric really is a once in a lifetime talent, and in his dedication, and he's so just basic.
Mm-hmm.
He's so just, I had the pleasure of having dinner with him in New York with Kirkman, and I gushed over him because I do. I go, man, the guy is just, I wish I had that dedication. I wish I had that drive. And again, Dragon is spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people who have not checked it out, they should, they should check it out and give it a second look, and definitely goes by those collections. But you go, I mean, there's only one guy who's been doing the exact same thing since, 1992, and he, deserves whatever accolades we can bestow upon him. Again, because like I said, and I know that he has also inspired Robert, so it goes hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Eric is the heart and soul of Image Comics, and should be remembered that way, in my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert is the greatest and most successful comic book creator in the business,
mm-hmm.
and achieved it through Image Comics. And so those guys are both my buddies. I'm much closer to Robert, but I'm so, like, you kind of look back on it and your generation and your peer group, and you're just so proud of your buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so, so like I said, I'm glad I'm associated with Image. I'm glad I can still hang out and do books there. But I just so proud of the vision, the company, Eric's maintaining of the vision in the company, and Robert as the champion, and Eric as the heart and soul. Because I mean, it's any of those pieces doesn't fit, I'm not sure that it achieves. I really emphasize, if there's no Robert Kirkman, I'm not sure we're
even having this
dealing with
conversation.
the Image Comics we're dealing with. Yeah, I don't believe Image is much more than a vanity label for whoever hung around.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Chew would be like the number 2. It launched shortly after Walking Dead, and didn't they just do 100 issues, or was it 75?
They did 60, and it just wrapped. But yeah,
60. Okay, but you look and you go, like, Walking Dead. I mean, they're closing. Are they over 200? They're closing in on 200.
It's about 160 right now, I think.
Okay, I mean, you go, so since Robert walked through the door, you're going to have 160, 170 Invincibles,
Yeah.
160, Walking Dead. I mean, the guy came in and said, "Okay, so this is how you do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay," and just did it. and I believe that's why I say he's the bedrock.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is how it's done here. And then along the way, he showed everybody else maybe how to do it better. And certainly, no Walking Dead, no Saga.
Right.
I mean, I make all these connections.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, man, it's awesome to know these guys. It's awesome that Image is still going strong. Image's future is bright. And think about that, a company where all the participants own their own stuff.
It's amazing.
And so we're basically talking about one of the most successful comic book distribution platforms ever.
Mm-hmm.
But did its launch in the same way? And I'll go back, and I feel like I should do that on behalf of the 7. Did our rocket ship launch provided enough fuel through the crazy downtimes in the first decade? 100%, 100%. And trust me, brother, I meet those fans. When I tell you I am on the convention circuit,
oh yeah,
they know what's available now. They know what media exists, whether it's games, action figures, Funko Pops, cartoons, movies, and they want their stuff.
Right.
that there is no 90s representation of Image Comics in the greater media. And because we own what we did, that promise is available to us.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it's, I've seen these fans and they bring me these books and they're rabid and they tell me how old they were when they bought them. And you see in their eyes, the favor for this body of work, in the same way that I will buy every compilation of Frank Miller's Daredevil till I die,
mm-hmm.
because that body of work is magic. And those books and those first several years of Image Comics remains magic for that fan base. And then Robert has provided a bridge to a whole new culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the next couple of years, I really think the next 5-6 years is going to be the most exciting for Image Comics. Because one of those, you're going to get a greater media representation. And you go, well, Rob, we're talking movies? No. It may involve media or cartoon
mm-hmm.
movies, but what I'm talking about is, by virtue of any one of the original 7 Image properties launching into a greater media window, you're going to get collections, publishing, more shelf space at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon. So that's when I say, to see how Image has kept pace in this new media-driven world, where you've got Warner Brothers desperately trying to keep up with Marvel, who does nothing but hit home runs
right.
in media. I mean, every movie's a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Every movie generates a new round of interest. And over here in the Image world, you got the number one show on television,
mm-hmm.
and it's driving, and it's the flagship, the media standard bearer for this publishing company. But let's not kid ourselves; we're adults. Media exposure drives greater interest in publications.
Mm-hmm.
I've been at the store as they're ringing up my collection. I mean, my books for the week. When 2 people come in and go, hey, what Doctor Strange books can I buy from you?
Mm-hmm.
What Deadpool stuff can I give Junior? And they always come back and they want to read the stories. They want to see where it came from. So I'm just justifying why I believe Image's biggest growth is ahead of it.
Yeah,
is because there's going to be further media acknowledgement of this stuff, and it's going to drive collections. And that's obviously, Image is such a powerful force in publishing as it is. So that's my bold prediction for the future.
I love it, and I agree. I agree entirely. But Rob, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with Rob Liefeld, talking the history of Image Comics. You can find Rob on Twitter at Robert Liefeld, and you can find the article on the history of Image that this interview led to at The Ringer. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at SketchComic, or follow me at SliceFriedGold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher, and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen, as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in later this week for another episode.